Tanya, very much indeed, not only for the invitation to be here to speak to this august community, but also for the establishment of this Friends of Religious Freedom. I think this is a very important group that has been formed, and I'm very grateful for your presence here this morning, or this afternoon now. Religious freedom is one of those catch cries which has been echoed throughout civilization in many ways. And we've lived very comfortably in Australia, I think, up until this point in time. But in the last number of years, there have been threats to religious freedom. And the threats have come from individuals seeking either they don't like to be offended, for example, and the concept of being offended seems to have a very strong stream in parts of Australia. We saw that in the Porteous incident in Tasmania, where the Roman Catholic Archbishop spoke to a document with regard to marriage, which was the law of the land at the time, of course, and that brought him before an administrative tribunal. As Tanya said, our states need to be cognizant of the importance of religious freedom with regard to where we are. I think the latest developments, the last couple of weeks in our state parliament with regard to the private members bill on the misnamed reproductive care reform bill has evidenced the importance of the freedom of religion. You see that most notably in the conscience of doctors with regard to taking part in abortions, but you see with regard to the individualism of abortion in terms of a mother making a sole decision on herself. We need to recognise that what differentiates religious freedom from, if you like, say, the rights of the LGBT community is that that's an identity issue. Sexual identity is something to do with your person. But religious freedom is an association. It's a corporate venture, so that we have represented here, whether it be synagogues or congregations or other groups where people meet together. They meet together collectively because they share a common view with regard to, and they want to be able to express their freedom in that regard. That association identification of religious freedom is very important in this debate, because we don't want the Parliament dictating with regard to our associations. The remarks of Peter Fitzsimons in the newspapers over the weekend, and I can quote, he writes, "After the abortion bill hopefully passes through the upper house in short order," that's his aspiration, "what next for progressive politics in New South Wales? It will be a revisitation of the assisted dying legislation that failed to pass through the upper house in 2017 by just one vote." There is a tsunami of opposition to the Judeo-Christian ethics, which has been so much the foundation of our society in Australia. And that is with regard to it's an individual choice and the mantra of individual choice without recognising how individual choice affects society. You see it most notably in erratic terrorist acts, whether it's a man stabbing people in Clarence Street, or episodes we've seen in New Zealand across the ditch, or in America, or even in Martin Place a couple of years ago. Society is affected by individuals like that. And individual choice must be seen in the balance of what is good for society. And we need to recognise that freedom has to be there for the common good. From a Christian perspective, we recognise people are made in the image of God. And therefore every person, every individual from conception on is valued by God and therefore ought to be valued by us. And let me add, that means the value of those who oppose us, those who have no religious affection or affiliation. And we see them equally valued. So it is not some kind of cohort with regard to a ghetto of mentality, but rather an openness in our society so that we freely associate and live in this state and in this country. Tanya has mentioned with regard to the matters before the federal government, but the matters, as she indicated, we're waiting for finally some form of Religious Discrimination Act. The final form of that bill is yet to be revealed. And we've been promised by the Prime Minister a number of us met with the Prime Minister just recently, that there'll be consultation once the text of that bill has been released. Likewise, consultation in New South Wales, with the people of New South Wales, is essential for good government. And I think the current bill, the lack of consultation, despite protestations to the contrary from the promoter of the bill in the lower house, there has been no consultation with the community. As I said to the Select Committee of the upper house recently, if 66% of New South Wales identify as Christian or as religious, then we need to recognise that's 2/3 of the state. And not to have consultation with the leaders of religious communities is very poor governance, in my view. And that's where, if we understand our relationship as a parliament to the people of New South Wales, yes, the people of New South Wales get their voice every 4 years, as we know, and I recognise that representatives are not delegates, and I also understand those distinctions, but I also recognise to represent your community means to you to understand your community, and particularly to understand the religious nature of our community, which is greater in New South Wales than other states. I think Victoria is a very clear example of the other extreme, and what the Andrews government is doing there and continues to do on a progressive element is something which we would not want to see in our state. So today is a day for us to rethink and recast the freedoms which we have enjoyed, but which we need to protect. If we don't stand up for these freedoms, then they will be eroded. As I've said to my people, the silent majority, if they remain silent, will become the silent minority. And we therefore need to be able to stand firmly, actually for the good of our society. Diversity of opinion is actually good for society. But when you shut down one area, as you can see in the history of our world, that's when totalitarianism comes in. And I could give, if I had time, a whole host of examples whereby religious freedoms have been denied. And when you have to stand up for them, it's very costly. Costly in time, in finances, with regard to going through courts. Clear legislation which protects the people of New South Wales for their religious freedom is what we want and encourage you to support. Thanks very much.